Rachel Smith is the founder of FibroFit Warriors, a science-based program dedicated to helping people with fibromyalgia manage their symptoms through movement, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies. She holds a master's in exercise science where she wrote her thesis on using exercise to treat fibromyalgia. She's also a certified personal trainer with specialized certifications in corrective exercise, nutrition, and sleep and stress management. I'm really excited to have Rachel on today because, as you all know, I really don't like sensationalized, kind of gimmicky, like health and wellness tips. And I also don't believe that research always captures our experiences really well. And so Rachel has her own experience with fibromyalgia as well as being autistic and having ADHD. And so she really gets it. And I get the impression from interviewing her that her program is really solid. So she and I will also be doing a couple of workshops together on March 29th at noon Eastern. She'll be doing a presentation for us. If you're in my membership, it's free. If not, then it's $27. But I always have pay what you can option discount codes, as you guys know. So feel free to sign up for that in the show notes. And she also is doing her own workshop or webinar on March 20th. So definitely sign up for that. It's free. She'll be talking about what fibromyalgia actually is according to the latest research, which has kind of changed over the years, the science behind why everything hurts and what triggered it, why getting diagnosed is so hard, and which treatments are backed by research and which ones are a waste of time, which that's right up my alley. I love that. So hopefully you enjoy this interview and you will check out some of the links in the show notes, and we look forward to seeing you at a future workshop. The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learn here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
I'm looking forward to our chat today. Yes, I'm looking forward to sharing kind of some of the work that you do. I know you're a personal trainer and you work a lot. Do you have conditions yourself that led you into this work of personal training with the chronically ill and pain population?
Yes. So I actually have fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed in 2010. And this was actually way before I, was even a certified personal trainer. I was actually a middle school teacher at the time and got diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2010. And that was kind of what sparked my whole self-discovery journey that eventually led to my master's degree in 2016.
Okay, amazing. So what was
Mhm.
your master's in?
So my master's is in exercise science.
Okay.
And what I was really fortunate to do was for my master's thesis, I was allowed to pick any topic that I wanted to research. And so obviously, I would want to pick a topic that was near and dear to me. And my thesis was researching how exercise can be used to manage fibromyalgia symptoms.
I love that. Tell me then, what did you find in regard to, and let me ask too,
Mm,
like with something like fibromyalgia, which I think there's a lot more understanding around it now than ever before, but
yes.
it does it still feel like to you, like does fibromyalgia feel like it captures exactly what was happening for you? Do you ever wonder if there are other things happening too that maybe were misdiagnosed or undiagnosed?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I have this perspective now. I've worked with over 200 clients now who have all come to me saying they're diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And through working together, we start pulling like all of these pieces and like, well, that doesn't really match what the research says, or that symptom isn't textbook fibromyalgia. Let's see what's going on. And I feel very fortunate. I think if it was just me, like if I was on my own, I would not see all of the different how do I put patterns, I guess.
Uh,
So for me, I'm now able to say, okay, I have fibromyalgia. I am also hypermobile, but I do not have EDS.
okay.
And I have many allergies, but I do not have MCAS.
Okay.
And I had fatigue, but not to the point of having MECFS. So like I'm able to kind of see what the research says, what my clients are saying, what I'm personally experiencing, and you know, being able to see all of those. I will say though, I've been recently diagnosed with ADHD and autism,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
I'm learning is extremely common among those with chronic illnesses. So
Yes.
I am not surprised at all.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I've been learning a
Mhm.
lot lately about, and I try. I hate talking about things that I don't really have a big understanding about. So anybody listening can correct me on this, but I have been learning lately about the way that our neurons even look and how many like extra kind of neurons we have. And my conceptualization of that is like, because we're known to be highly sensitive. We're known to like
Mhm.
up. It's funny, people say like autistic people like don't pick up social cues. My um thinking on that is more like we pick up so much at once that we almost just become like
Yes.
frozen and stuck.
Yep.
Um
Yep.
so I guess that resonates too. Yeah.
Very
And
much
for
so.
me,
Yeah.
like, one of the things that I watched, recently, it was a TikTok video, but it kind of explained it had, like, pictures of the 2 different neurons, and she was like, basically, like, we all kind of are born with all these neurons, and they then are pruned throughout as we grow and age. They're pruned, and we become less sensitive to stimuli as our brains kind of learn what's necessary to know and what we can just kind of throw out. And for the autistic brain, and I would imagine people with chronic pain is like the same thing, whether you're autistic or not, because it just makes so much sense to me, is
Yep.
that maybe we are not, and the video was saying how we just don't prune the same way. We don't prune away, so it doesn't become simplified. And so we keep all of these neurons that are picking up on all of these cues, and like that in and of itself, it's a lot it's a lot. And so our bodies are constantly bombarded with stimuli, which that's how I am conceptualizing like the MCAS symptoms and the chronic pain and the tenderness and the pain, yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I know very little about how the brain works. But just having you explain that, it given my lived experience and also what I'm seeing with my clients, that would make complete sense. So in I actually which we can talk about later if we want, but I have a program called Fiber Fit Warriors. And one of the very first kind of modules or lessons that we talk about are kind of the research that shows that people with fibromyalgia tend to be perfectionists. We tend to be all or nothing thinkers. Um, some folks will describe that as, black and white thinking or something like that. But what I like to tell my clients is, we always want to just go, 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 go and do all of the things. And I think that's also what makes having a chronic illness so hard for us is our personalities want to do everything. And I'm speaking from personal experience. And so when suddenly your body says, no, you can't, um, it can be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the common things that I see and work with and hear about is pathological demand avoidance, and
Yes.
I'm like, is it like that word, that term has such like a it's your choice, you're like being avoidant of demand, and I'm like, I feel like your body is giving you signals that it is too much. It has been too much for
Yes.
a while, and it is saying no now, like, that's it.
Yeah. 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 Like something that I'm sure you're familiar with, like spoon theory.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I teach my clients, is pacing. But I feel like with spoon theory, a lot of people will kind of hoard their spoons or
Mhm.
hoard their energy because they will say, like, oh, I've got this really big event tonight, so I'm not going to do anything all day so that I can have the energy. And what I show them is actually the research says the opposite, that too little activity can also cause symptom flare ups. And so I'm still trying to come up with a cute name to make it catchy, but it is currently pause and pivot,
Yeah, hey, that works. That's
right?
exactly right.
Right. Or I'm just like, whether you are working at your computer, heads down focused, or you're up on your feet running errands or walking around Disney World, you know, like an hour in, 2 hours in, set an alarm, you know, and remind yourself to change what you're doing. So if you're walking, sit down for a minute. If you're sitting at your computer, get up and go get a glass of water. And obviously, easier said than done. I have ADHD.
Yeah,
I
but it's
get
a
it.
skill. That's the thing, like, it's a
Yes.
skill, and I think personally because of the way again, I'm visualizing this kind of neuron where it has all of these different neurons that the way that I see it is like, okay, because we have so much muscle memory for a certain thing, staying focused or like sitting down or like the muscle memory or the neuronal memory around it is so much more intense. It's so much harder to pivot. And again, like that's all that means is we need extra repetitions and more practice with pivoting so that it
Yeah,
becomes easier, but it's not going to be easy when you first start trying it.
exactly. Exactly. And, that's something that I tell clients as well. So kind of the thing that I'm kind of coming out with, which I used to be very quiet about this, is that my fibromyalgia had been in remission since 2014.
Mm,
And I had briefly mentioned it on socials, etc., and decided, you know what, that's my personal journey. I'm not going to say it because I don't want anyone to compare their journey to mine or think that I'm promising anything because I'm not.
right.
But recently I've decided, you know what, I'm going to start sharing this. And the thing that I tell folks is it didn't happen overnight. It's not like I woke up one day and suddenly, oh my gosh, it's all gone. It does not happen. This happened from I was diagnosed in 2010. It was 2014 by the time I went to the doctor and went, I don't remember the last time I had like a really bad flare up.
Yep.
And it was the constant experimentation and practicing of the different things. So, exercise obviously is the one that I preach, but reducing stress, improving my sleep, learning how to
Yep.
pace my activity levels, it those took many years for me to finally get the hang of it. And
Yeah.
then eventually it did work for me.
Yes, that's been my experience too. It's just like
Mhm.
constantly coming back and trying to learn whatever habit you've been trying to learn, whether it's sleep hygiene or working out or eating breakfast, just
Yes.
food in 3 times a day or more. Like, yeah, it's all really hard to do, especially the more supports you need and the lower supports you have. And so we just give a lot of grace for that, right? And then
Yes.
we come back and it's funny because as you were talking about pausing and pivoting kind of away from like a hyper focus kind of situation to help
Mhm.
yourself go do something else, like I often help clients pivot back to like I use that same kind of analogy of pivoting back to focusing. So like you
Yes.
catch yourself and then you come back to center and you catch yourself again and you come back to center. And it's so hard,
Oh, yeah.
but it gets easier the more you practice.
Oh my gosh. That could be a whole other thing we could talk about with discovery because it's funny, I was diagnosed with ADHD and, looking back at my school experience, it obviously makes so much sense now. And that whole, getting distracted um is something that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, for girls, it often goes so, missed because we get distracted in our heads more often, like, we
Yeah,
go and
daydreaming.
yeah, exactly.
Yep,
Yeah, but
all the
I
time.
was always the one with, like, I had to make sure I was behind a seat that had a basket in front of it so my legs could be up and I could be, like, shaking or, like, tapping my feet or yeah.
I had to be in the front row of all of my classes. If
Okay.
I'm not in the front row, I will watch every other student in the classroom and it's over. It's
Yes.
like,
Yep. That makes sense. So tell me, how did exercise come into play for you, and was it hard, or was that getting into it easy for you?
yeah. Okay. So, diagnosed in 2010, and I want to say it was like 2011 ish. I was at a party with just some friends, and they had a friend that I had met for the first time. And I was talking to her about, oh yeah, I just got recently diagnosed with fibromyalgia, et cetera, et cetera. And she goes, oh, I have that, but I exercise and change my diet, and I feel better. And I was like, wait, what?
That's an option.
Right? And so I was like, okay. But back in 2011, there there wasn't nothing that I could just Google
No.
and be like, how to exercise with fibromyalgia. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So 2011, 2012, if we think back then, things that were super popular were the paleo diet,
Yeah.
the whole 30, did
Yep.
both.
Yeah.
And exercise programs were the Tone It Up Girls,
Yeah.
Haled Cena's Bikini Body Guide, and I did all of them. I
Oh,
did like I fell down the fad diet and exercise rabbit hole,
yes.
and it was such a struggle.
Yeah.
Because one, like those workouts are not meant for people with chronic illness. But I was so determined because I was like, no, this is supposed to work. And of course, also there was, the diet culture piece of it. Like I was starting to gain weight because, of being sedentary, which made me feel very uncomfortable. And so I was also very desperate to lose weight at the time and would kind of like push myself to do those really high intensity interval trainings, all of the cardio that the Tone It Up girls wanted, etc. And it really wasn't until I discovered um, this is very niche, but there's on bodybuilding.com, there's a woman called Jamie Eason,
Okay.
and she had a free weightlifting program that you could download. And I started weightlifting and I noticed a difference where I was like, okay, this feels different. And it didn't make any sense at the time because I was like, why can't I lift weights and be decently okay? But I can't walk to the grocery store without causing like insane amounts of fatigue and everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I found something that works. So let me just continue doing it. And I absolutely fell in love with weightlifting. I am it's like strength training. I say this all the time. I will die on this hill. Everybody should strength train. Everybody.
Yeah.
And
The levels and
you know,
like, how much you're doing and all of that changes,
it,
but
exactly. Exactly. And I think that's what some people misunderstand because especially when they see my Instagram account and they see me, deadlifting 200 pounds. I actually, to fix this, I went and I looked through my camera roll from 2012 so
no.
that I have footage of me deadlifting 20 pounds
Yes.
because I was like, I think people need to see
Yeah.
that I didn't just suddenly deadlift 200 pounds one day.
Yeah.
It took time to kind of adjust and modify. And the same way, part of my master's degree, I did a lot of research on lifting weights with the elderly.
Okay.
And that's another thing I'm extremely passionate about. I think anybody over the age of 65, especially, should weight lift. And anybody who's ever looked at a weightlifting program designed for someone over the age of 65, that's going to look closer to the type of weightlifting that you should try when you are first starting out
Yep.
with exercising with chronic pain. And then slowly over time, you will see that you can do more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my experience, 100%. My husband has the same degree that you do, so
Yay! Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yes, and most of his clients are over 60. So,
Yes.
yeah, it is, and he's always trying to get me to do what he wants me to do, which is fair because he's right, but it's still a little hard for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is hard. And I think what got me to personally fall in love with weightlifting was I'm only 5 foot tall. So I'm a very petite woman. And I don't want to say I've always felt weaker,
Mhm.
but I didn't always feel as strong and capable as I did. And there was something about going into the gym and picking up a 30-pound dumbbell and being able to pick it up
Yeah.
that just sparked something in me that was like, oh my gosh, like I'm way stronger than I give myself credit for. And that kind of, I don't want to call it chasing the high, but similar of like that high that you get when you do something that you didn't think was possible and you just did it.
Yeah.
um that's something that keeps me going to the gym, every week.
Yeah, it built up that confidence and a little bit of, um, specific to you, the insecurity that you had, it touched that
Mhm.
very specifically, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is why, again, it's also personalized and individual because it's not just about your muscles and your body, it's also, like, how your brain interprets what's happening in your body and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And one of the things that I teach my clients is, motivation to exercise will always come and go, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, oh man, I can't wait to go work out today. Like, no,
Mhm.
even me and I, for someone who loves weightlifting, there there are days where I cannot be bothered to go. Like that is the last thing
Or
I want to do. And so one of the techniques that I teach is to remember what it feels like after you finish a workout.
yeah.
And sometimes I have them, like when they start their program, I have them message me that they did their workout and how they feel. And I said, screenshot this message
Yeah.
about how great you feel and how accomplished you feel, because there are going to be days when you don't want to go. And so if you can remember, oh, right, but every time I finish a workout, I feel so capable and strong and proud of myself,
Yeah.
that'll get you in the door.
Yeah, yeah, yes, and I think also for people who maybe, like, the other piece of that is, like, you can also expose yourself to not feeling good and, like, knowing I'm not gonna f some workouts
Mhm.
won't feel as good at the end, that's
Yeah.
been my experience anyway, and so
Yep.
that's when the all of these tools are important to work together, right? Because that's when the other tools of, like, "Okay, but this is important to me, and I know that the overall benefit like, if there's more benefit way more benefit than harm. The only harm here is, like, just not feeling like it," you know? Um,
Yes.
yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I'm glad that you bring that up, because that's something else that I teach
Mhm.
is that um I don't know who needs this permission, but like you don't have to finish a workout
Yeah,
for it to like count.
don't.
And I feel like, I don't know if it's a society thing or our perfectionism or
Yeah,
something, but one of the very first things that I teach is like, if you go to the gym and you do not feel right. Physically, obviously, but even just mentally, if you're like, okay, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or even if it's a home workout, I'm going to do this for 5 minutes at home and reevaluate. If you're still like, nah, no, this isn't. I was like, just stop.
yep,
Like you don't have to be miserable.
yeah,
And hey, you did 5 minutes already. So
Yes.
that's great.
Yeah, and then you're teaching your body to trust it because when you say no, it
Mhm.
means you're gonna listen, and then your body's like, "Oh, we're not pushing ourselves into major pain every
Yes.
time," and your nervous system just slowly
Yeah.
starts to trust your body a little more.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because I feel like, so I have clients that fall into two buckets. So I have the clients who stopped exercising when they got diagnosed, or had tried, had it had been a disaster and was like, I'm never doing that again. And so a lot of the work that I do with them is getting them to trust their body again, to slowly work into it, to learn how to kind of modify exercise for them. Um, but I also have the clients on the opposite end who um, are very, you know, go, go, go. And I was exercising this way before fibromyalgia. I refuse to let this, um, stop me, etc. And, even though I say, hey, for a couple of weeks, can you pull back on your marathon training? Can you pull back on your hit workouts? Let's calm your nervous system down just a little bit. And then we can add all those things back. And it's very hard for them to let go of those things because they have this mentality of like, no, I'm fine. I can do this. And for some, yes, they can. I've had some folks who continue their training. And I said, okay, I'm here to help support you, whatever you need, keep going. And they were able to continue their marathon training and run their marathon, which is amazing. But there are also folks who then do the whole boom and bust cycle where they push, 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 push for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden can't do anything for multiple weeks at a time. And that's when we have those discussions of like, okay, now you see what happens. Are you willing to try it my way?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's when we can start making changes.
Yeah, and that's exactly to the point of, like, it just has to be trial and error, but with
Yes.
guidance, right? Not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, but, like, with someone who understands
Mhm.
that there's individualization with all of this and that we do have to kind
Mhm.
of do some trial and error to figure out your unique needs. But again, that doesn't mean we are just throwing things at the wall, not knowing what we're doing. There's still kind of a rhyme and a reason for why we're making these choices.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. The individual um, kind of learning what works for you is incredibly important. And that's one of the things. So, CyberFit Warriors, my program, is technically a group program. So, everybody at the beginning receives the same workouts, and there's a community aspect to it. And that is related to a lot of the research around when people with fibromyalgia want to start exercising. They do significantly better when they are in a group with other people who also have fibromyalgia, to help support them. And there are multiple studies that show this. And so, it's very important to me that it stays as a group program. But one of the things that I tell all my clients is that, but you also have one-on-one with me.
Yes.
So, through the community group, they can message me with individual questions. If we need to modify their workouts, we can take them down. If they have certain injuries, we can modify them. And then I do have some folks who actually need more advanced workouts, and I have those available for them too. But I find that you really need those both pieces, me there to help support you and make it individual, but then also have that community aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much to be said about community work. Do you find
Mhm.
that some people move from like being helped a lot to then the helper role in the group?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and thankfully, a lot of folks who do become the helper, like one of the things that I'm always worried about is misinformation being
Right.
spread.
Right.
And so, occasionally with the community group, I will have folks that come to me and will share, something pseudosciency.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that does not happen that often because I find that because I'm so evidence based, I tend to attract people who are also very evidence based. But every once in a while, they'll say, "Oh, I heard something on the internet. Can you tell me if this is true or not?" And then the research in me comes out, and I'm like, "Well, here are 17 scientific studies saying why that's BS."
Yeah.
Um, but and so that's something I'm always worried about. But what is really nice is I find more often than not, once people actually get things working for them, they have nothing but great suggestions for the other folks. I
Good.
see this on, yeah, I see this a lot with um, sometimes some of my clients will join Fiber Fit Warriors and they're still petrified to work out, which I completely empathize with. Like, obviously, it's going to be very, very scary when all your past attempts have probably been uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, having the few people who do jump right in and share in the community group, like, "Hey, I did this workout and it didn't flare me. And it actually went a lot better than I thought." Then I have the others go, "Oh, okay, let me try it." And
Yeah.
then everybody's working out.
I love that. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so, and I'm glad you are kind of filtering out that misinformation. That was a big part of why I got online years ago as a therapist. I like was diagnosed with Lyme and I found myself in all these Lyme groups and like they made me think I was going to die in a week.
Oh,
So
oh my gosh.
like,
Oh my gosh, yes.
and I'm a big fan
We've
of like,
had very similar.
go for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, the fibromyalgia groups on Facebook are very similar.
Yeah.
And I actually tell my clients to leave those groups
Yeah.
because I said I don't, and I have a lot of empathy for the people who share in those groups. They are very scared
Yes.
and very upset, and they typically don't have support systems, but it can negatively affect your own mental health
Yes,
by
especially in the
consuming
very
them.
beginning, yeah. I mean, I
Mhm.
left them for, like, a couple of years, and then I'd gone back in when I felt like I was stronger and what I knew and what I felt was right for me and my body. Because yeah, you if you're looking for influence, you have to be careful what environment you're in.
Yes.
Yeah, and, it's not to say that evidence-based, like, doesn't forget or doesn't it often can leave out a lot of lived experience, and I get that, and I empathize with that.
Mhm.
That was I think that's a big reason why people are so kind of sometimes anti-evidence based. um but I think
Yeah.
there's enough of us out there now that like think in the past like lived experience just didn't, if you had any kind of disability or pain or whatever, and we didn't make it into grad school, we didn't make it into becoming a doctor, we didn't, and now there's a
Yes.
lot more of us with lived experience also doing research and working in the fields, and so I think it's becoming a lot more balanced.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good observation. Because that's something that I have thought of when um, I'm on Instagram looking to connect with others with chronic illness. And I noticed that those who are in a good place or who have managed their symptoms, are feeling better, they don't put chronic illness in their Instagram bio. They don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And that was actually a confession that I even made on my Instagram. I don't I don't tell my friends that I have fibromyalgia. When I meet new people, I don't mention it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like I've sort of not moved on with my life, but it's not all consuming anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't make up who you are, whereas when you're first learning it, like, yeah, you
Mhm.
are a little bit consumed by it, and you kinda have to be. You're learning a new thing, and there's a lot to learn, and,
Yeah.
uh, you know? But then at some point, yeah, like, you have to remember that there are so many other parts to you and, especially especially if you are ADHD or autistic and it then kind of becomes a little bit of a special interest, and then you get really kinda hurt by people who aren't as interested in it as you are, and I get that. But, there's, like, that's another kind of piece of the journey, the self-development journey on all of this. Like, it's okay to have a special interest for
Yeah.
LPL, but if people don't get just as amped as you, it doesn't mean they don't care. Sometimes, sure,
Yes.
but
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
um
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned special interest because when I shared my autistic diagnosis with my Instagram, someone actually said, "Oh, now I trust what you're saying about fibromyalgia even more
yeah.
because it, it's obvious that that's your special interest."
That's yeah, right, because you've really done the research on it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, and that just brought me to the idea of the lived experience plus the evidence-based information again. Like, if we know, like, if someone has lived experience, then it's
Mhm.
important to them, right? They're gonna pay more attention to it. That's just human nature and human behavior. So it does build some trust there. Let
Yeah, definitely. Um,
me think. What's another kind of important thing that people when they come into your program is, like, maybe a common
mhm.
myth or a common thing that you have to kind of work on with people before you can really get to the other stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the most common myth that I am busting is that fibromyalgia is caused by diet. And I will preface everything that I'm about to say in that I'm not a registered dietitian. I stay in my lane. But I do have a certification in nutrition and I have done extensive reading about the diet and fibromyalgia. And what I have found is that like the systematic reviews have shown that there is no one particular diet for people with fibromyalgia. So anybody saying that the carnivore diet's going to heal you or paleo is going to heal you or anything like that, it like there it's all
Studies have been
BS.
done, and it shows there is no yeah.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
do you find that there's, like, a diet approach individualistically? Like, each person somebody can find benefit when they change their diet in a way that works for them, which again is through trial and error. Is that something that happens, or is diet pretty, like, a small part of it?
That is.
Okay.
So, yes. So, what I tell clients is that just like any other food allergy, a food aversion, food sensitivity, it's going to be very unique to you. And we do have research that shows that gluten seems to be a very common, I would say, like irritant to folks. So, it's called non celiac gluten sensitivity. And the overlap between those with fibromyalgia and those with non-celiac gluten sensitivity is pretty high. I'm personally one of them. And I would say of like the 200 something clients that I've had, only about 5 or 6 of them have not reacted to gluten.
Okay.
So that's a very common one, but really the only way to know for sure is through trial and error. And something that I teach, I do not teach to doing extreme elimination diets. So you will not see me say, oh, you have to cut out 12 foods. I don't do that. So instead, I personally teach cutting out one at a time and then reintroducing it and seeing how you feel. Because I said, you know, you might not feel a difference the 3 weeks that you cut it out because there's so many other things going on that would be causing flare ups. But as soon as you eat it again, that's when you'll start noticing kind of an increase in symptoms. Um, and so I have folks start with gluten. A lot of people are now coming to me already gluten free
Mhm.
because they've noticed it themselves. And so then we talk about, okay, do you want to try dairy? Do you want to try artificial sweeteners? Caffeine? Oh, corn is apparently another one that some people are sensitive to, although it's not very common. But it's very much trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I think sometimes you can get into this kind of phase or this period in your chronic illness journey where it feels like you want to try everything. You really do want to throw everything at the wall because you have no like it feels so hard to figure out what to do next. So, I think sometimes they come in especially with something like fibromyalgia where there are so many people talking about diet and exercise and other things,
Mhm.
supplements, cannabis,
Yes.
whatever, like all of the things, right? And so like you said, 10 years ago, there was not so much on the internet. Now there's a lot. And so with a
Yes.
Google search, you can get 20 different things to try. And people really
Yes.
rush to try all the things. And
Yeah.
I think that gets us in a lot of trouble too. So
Mhm.
yeah, one thing at a time, even if it's just the exercise. And it has to be too psychologically, you have to be ready to cut that thing out.
Exactly, exactly, and that's why, in 2016, if you had asked me, I would say, "Oh, do the Whole30. Do it, like, you're eating whole foods, you're cutting out the common foods that, are irritating to people with fibromyalgia. You get it done in 30 days, great." But what I kept noticing was how many people binged after they completed,
Yeah.
including myself.
Yeah.
Like because when you go through something that restrictive, sure, maybe it worked, but did it? Because
Exactly.
I would get so frustrated because I would see people do Whole 30s 4 or 5 times in a row
Yeah.
because they didn't know how to eat.
Yeah, and then they think, "Well, I didn't do it right, so I've gotta try it again."
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And now I'm finding I was like, okay, with my clients, we're doing one at a time because, um, and the other thing as well, you mentioned eating breakfast. Like that's another when people come to me and they say, "Well, Rachel, what are your what's your nutrition plan?" And I'm like, eat 3 meals a day.
Yes.
That's my
Yeah,
nutrition plan.
exactly. People really and then especially with intermittent fasting, being so
Yes.
trendy and I learned this from my functional medicine doctor, like, if you're going to fast, like, you really should not be fasting in the morning. And
That's what I say too.
good. Okay, good. I was
Yep.
so frustrated. Like I just saw it again like this past week and I'm like, there's so much misinformation out here. And the girl
Oh,
was like, if you think about it, you went to bed at 8, you woke up at 7. That's just 3 more hours you have to do before and I'm like before your 14-hour fat. I might have just did the math wrong, but like she was
yeah.
basically saying like if you just go another 2 hours, you've done your 14-hour fast. And I'm like, no, why? Why is this still being
No.
perpetuated?
Yeah, and I have some folks who are adamant about wanting to do intermittent fasting. And I was like, "Okay, if this is what you wanna do, then I want you to eat breakfast and I want you to eat dinner early and start your fast early."
Yep.
But there's so much research now, especially among women, that, with how stressed we are in the morning, etc.
Yep.
Fasting is only going to make it worse. It only does some weird things to our hormones.
Yep.
And not to mention, if you are a coffee drinker at all,
Yeah.
you should absolutely be eating food.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's so odd to like be coming back to the basics over and over and over again because you're like,
Mhm.
if it's this easy, why isn't everyone just doing it? Or if it's this simple, why there's so much information? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I started thinking about because in the fibromyalgia community, um, I've noticed a lot of people are drawn to extremes, which makes sense. We're all perfectionists, we're all or nothing thinkers, right? So we want to look for these challenges, like the 75 hard is a really big one right now. And I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, it's because we like following rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
Telling someone, "Hey, eat your vegetables," does not sound super sexy,
Yep. And
but
it
saying,
doesn't feel
"Yeah,
so it is a rule, and at the same time, it's not the sexy rule. It's not the, "If you
mm,
do this pl" like, yeah, I don't know really what the difference is in that.
yeah." Yeah, I feel like, it's one of the things that I say is, one, I'm not a registered dietitian, so
Okay.
I will not give you a meal plan,
Yeah.
and anybody who does is doing so illegally.
Yes.
Um, but I will help you create meals. And so I will say, like, hey, every meal I want to have a fruit or vegetable,
Right.
and every meal needs to have a source of protein, whether it's meat or plant-based, either one.
Yeah.
And so I teach folks how to kind of put together these well-rounded plates, and eat those 3 meals a day. And that's about as like ruly I get.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that there are still people who say, well, okay, I want you to tell me, like, eat strawberries for breakfast and
Yeah.
eat green beans for lunch.
Yes.
And it's like, well, what if you don't like strawberries?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know, I see that a lot in the neurodivergent community too.
Mhm.
We're just very
Yeah.
like rules and there was safety in rules because if we didn't follow like societal structures, then we got in trouble for that. And so
Yes.
there's a lot of like, I need you to give me the rules, but then if we really do some self-reflection, we know we're not going to follow it anyway. That was my
Exactly.
experience.
Oh, such a go.
Yeah, my husband probably hates me by now because of how many times I'd just be like, "Give me the workout. I need you to give me the workout." And he in his mind is like, "You're not gonna do the workout." Like, stop.
I have my
So
my husband has ADHD, and I've had similar experiences with him where I'm like, no, I'm not
I'm
giving that to
sorry on our
you.
behalf. It's hard. It's hard.
Ah,
But
mhm.
community is important. That's what did end up getting me really consistent. There's a really good functional medicine clinic here that has a like boutique gym in it. And so it's very
Oh,
small
nice.
fitness group. It's all like all of the training is done by the program is done by a physical therapist and then the trainers
Nice.
like implement that. And that was really great to have in person. But the scheduling got really hard, and so now I'm, like, trying to do
Mhm.
home but because I built like, I never would have been able to work out at home 5, 10 years ago, but because I
Yeah.
built so much, like, confidence and I think, like, pruning, like we were talking about earlier with the neurons, with just pure exposure mixed with support, now I feel like I can and I do stuff at home
Mhm.
now, but man, it took a long
Yeah.
time to get there.
Yeah. That does not surprise me.
Yeah,
And I've always thought like, oh, well, what would it be like if I had opened a gym,
yeah,
in person and bringing people in? And the reason that I don't, the reason that my program is all virtual, is because I want it to be accessible to folks who might not be able to come to a gym.
yeah,
And one of the things that I've noticed is, if you have a appointment with a trainer and you suddenly get extreme fatigue or your symptoms flare up and you have to cancel, that can be really hard. And so with the way that I work with my clients is I give them their workouts and they can do them through my app whenever it works for them.
yeah.
And that way, if something should come up, then they can kind of adjust.
Yeah, I think the accessibility and the flexibility is
Mhm.
so important, and I do think at certain times, like, especially with ADHD, we need that
Mhm.
urgency and the deadline and that we, like, need a thing is starting right now, and I'm never gonna do it if
Mhm.
it's not, like, somebody's not holding me accountable, but at the same time, like we already talked about, that's not a long-term solution, like, we do end up
Mhm.
backfiring against that, and so I do think
Yeah.
like, the flexibility and the accommodations is always going to win over the rigid, um,
Yeah.
but sometimes I think, you do need it for a minute to, like, kind of, maybe do something for you mentally, like, psychologically, and
Yeah.
then we've gotta find ways to be flexible again because that's really the only sustainable option.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And it's a really good point about kind of needing that, how do I put it, that push at the beginning. And I think that that is also why my program is like an 8-week program. So there's a start and a stop date.
Yep.
Because what I find is when folks sign up, that first couple of weeks, they are like ready to go.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like like anything, over the next course of the weeks, it gets a little harder to work out, etc.
Yep.
But at the end of the program, they get PDF copies of all of the workouts. So
Okay.
that way, even after the program ends, they lose access to my app, etc. Like you said, once you've done it a couple of times, they can then take the PDF and go, okay, I've done this before. I
Right.
can do this again on my own.
Yes. Yeah. So it ends at 8 weeks. I was gonna ask if you did like an alumni group or anything like
I
that.
do. I
Okay.
do. So, the alumni group is completely optional. But what I found was after going through Fiber Fit Warriors, people were asking for, more advanced workouts. But I think most importantly, they really liked the community aspect of it.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to lose that. And so my alumni program, it's month to month. They can cancel or join at any time.
Great.
And they'll be able to get new workouts. They can continue to ask me questions. They have the community. And then also, most importantly, most folks who come to me are all, like I said, researchers, evidence-based folks. They want to keep learning. And so every month I will share, a new mini training of, some new research that I found, or, I bring in guests is another thing, of people who are outside my scope who have something that they can teach my clients.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, you have a webinar coming up on March 20th of
I
2025.
do.
Wanna tell me about that one?
Yeah. So, um, one of the things that I really wanted to do was kind of make what I learned more accessible. So obviously, like I do charge for my program, because of my time, but I wanted to do something because I have a lot of folks that come to me, they might be on disability, or just, I think all of us are kind of strapped for cash right now. And so my coaching isn't in the budget. And one of the questions that I kind of routinely get in my DMs is, I've just been diagnosed. Now what? Like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of calling this, webinar or class, like Fibromyalgia 101, what you wish your doctors had told you.
Yeah.
And what I want to really cover is, one, why do a lot of doctors not know that much about fibromyalgia? So I'm going to share a lot of the research around that, about how it's not really taught. So if your doctor knows anything about fibromyalgia, it's because they actually went out and learned it on their own. But also talk about, how do you get diagnosed? What are the different theories on what causes it? What are the different medications you can ask your doctor for? And, why do people say that it's not real? And a lot of, I'm hoping to address some of the more prevalent misinformation.
Mhm.
So, actually, I just got this question today, on my Instagram DMs. Someone asked me about a blood test that you can take to
Mm.
get tested for fibromyalgia. And I said, no, that doesn't exist yet. They're researching it, but it doesn't exist yet. And they said, oh, well, there's this company called Epigenetics, and
Mm.
they're going around. And I was like, you should Google epigenetics lawsuit.
Yeah. Yes. Please.
Yes. And
Yes.
so I'm hoping to kind of address that as well, and just kind of get ahead of any possible misinformation that they will find on their journey of learning about fibromyalgia.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people can say, and those are free. The classes are free?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
it's going to be one class. I'll have it recorded, and obviously at the end, I will talk about my program. But they can always close out,
Yeah.
if they're not interested. Yeah,
It's not like just
exactly,
a sales pitch. It's you're teaching something, and then you will let them know,
exactly.
if you want more of this, I am available. But yeah, we all deserve to be paid for our time. And I think, yeah, I think hopefully there are not many people still doing the webinars that are like, you're going to learn this. And then it's really just a sales pitch.
My
But
gosh, it drives
yeah,
me nuts. It drives me nuts.
yes.
And yeah, so they were it's a real class where
Yes.
you'll learn real things.
Yes.
And I will kind of consent to be sold to is really big for me.
Right.
So when I do get ready to start talking about my services, I will let everybody know, okay, this is the end of the class. You're welcome to leave. If you want to hear more about it, you can continue, but it'll be very clear of where the class ends and, where I start talking.
Right.
But yeah, it'll be completely free. And so starting March 8th, right, that's Monday. Starting March 8th, I will start posting the sign up sheet for folks who are interested in coming to this class.
Got it. Yeah, this will air. I'm gonna try to get this out by the 14th. Don't hold me to it, but that's what
Okay.
I'm gonna look for. Yeah.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
yes. Good. Anything else that you feel like we maybe didn't touch on today that you wanted to share?
I think we really covered like all of the things that I am very passionate about, but my DMs are always open. So anybody listening to this podcast, you know, like feel free to message me with questions, to introduce yourself. Um, I started my social media because I felt so alone and felt like I didn't belong in a lot of those Facebook groups. And so it's incredibly important to me to be able to be a resource for people who might be feeling the same way. So
Great. I
yeah,
love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story and the research and for doing all of it. It's really refreshing. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then.